Welcome to the 2023 Virtual Christmas Summit. Please don't unmute or interrupt the presenter, and feel free to put any questions or discussion in chat. At this part is where I give a brief introduction to our presenter, but I got nothing on him, so I ain't gonna say anything bad. But with that, go ahead and take over, Mark.
All right. Thanks, Paul. And so we're going to talk about layouts and some basics and best practices. So this is geared mostly towards newer people, but if you've been doing X-Lights for a while, you may learn something too. So here's what we're going to cover. We're going to cover go over the X-Lights layout tab, some common layout mistakes, creating your layout, line direction and why it matters, and starting location and why that matters. Some ways to align props. We'll talk a little bit about native models and custom models. We'll do something very brief on submodels for windows and doors. Very, very simple. We're not going to get into anything detailed like some of the other talks about today. And we'll talk about how you can get models into your layout. We'll do a little bit of groups, and if time permitting, I want to say about a tiny bit on master view, at least how it ties to your layout. And the third tab's a little bit about me. I've been using X-Lights in sequencing for over 5 years. Actually started sequencing before I even got into the lights. I wanted to make sure this was something I wanted to get into before I even started. So I actually was playing around for just sequencing, not even worried about putting a show together for over a year. Some of my other hobbies, music. I play a little bit of guitar, a little bit of piano, sort of self-taught in there. Photography. Enjoy playing poker, and I actually coached youth football for about 16 years. Haven't done it pretty much since I started doing lights, so because both of them take a significant amount of time. And now we're going to jump into X-Lights. Let me just drag this over here. All right, so this is just a real simple layout that I've created, and this one's just going to show some problems that sometimes we see. All right, we got some horizontals, some verticals, a couple windows, and a door. And now we're going to jump over to the sequencer tab. And some good ways to test your layout. The bars effect is a really good thing to check your layout just to make sure things are working correctly. So we've put this bars effect on, and it's moving from left to right. Everything looks pretty decent here. It looks like it's doing what we want. So we might be pretty pleased with that we've got our layout set up right. This next one is going to go vertical, so it's moving up. Now this one starts to have can start to see a couple of issues. First one is with these windows, right? If we have both our windows, we would expect them, if we had a halfway decent builder, that they're at the same elevation. But if you look, this one turns red a split second before this one turns red or green. So the color change is not uniform, right? We would expect them, if this bars is moving up, it should happen the same thing. And we got something similar going on with these two horizontals here, right? Look, this one changes color first, then this one, and this one doesn't even change quite all at the same time. So there's something there, and we'll talk about what's causing that. So now we'll go down to a single strand effect. Now we got a single strand, move it across the horizontals, and that looks just how we'd expect it to behave, just how we'd want it to behave. But this one is working on a render style of the default. So, and we know we've got multiple single line elements. So if we try to put this single line on each individual element, well, now we've got stuff going all different directions. We've got stuff going to the left, stuff going to the right. And so that's not what we expected. Let's just check the verticals, right? So the same thing, we're on our default render style and everything's going verticals, looks good. But if we end up putting it on a per model default, we got some stuff going up and some stuff going down. So that means there's something's not quite right in our layout. So let's go figure out what those things were. All right. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how come the horizontals, like these, weren't matching. move in the correct direction. So if you click on this, you can see there's a green square and a blue square. Okay, and this one, the green square is on the right. If you look at this one, the green square is on the right. This one, the green square is on the left. This one's the green squares on the left. So whenever you're actually creating horizontal elements, you want to draw your element from left to the right, regardless of where you're connecting it, okay? And the reason it is that's the way Xlights expects it to behave. It's gonna, when it comes into the buffer, it's starting at the green and moving towards the blue. So that's why we are getting different directions in that horizontal effect when we're doing the per model defaults. Similar, it's the same thing here. Okay, see this line, the green is at the bottom. And on this one, the green was at the top. So when you're drawing your verticals, you want to draw them consistently, either all of them with the green at the bottom or all with the green at the top. Whenever I do mine usually all bottom to top, but then everything should be left to right. So that's the first thing we want to talk about. And then the other one is these windows didn't line up because on our photo, we line them up to the tops of the windows. But whenever you take a photo, there's inherent distortion and a little perspective skew. So it's not going to be perfect. So you want to think of your photo that you're using for your layout is a guide. You don't have to follow it exactly. Use it to get yourself close. And we're going to talk about when we get into layout how to align things. And it's the same thing with these verticals, or these two horizontals, right? We drew them right across the top of the gutter line. But I'm going to come in here. I'm going to draw another perfectly horizontal line, right? So now you look, if I line this up, you can see how much our photo is actually out of alignment with the house, or how much the photo is out of perspective skew we got and distortion. And so that's why those vertical effects weren't looking good. So those are some of those common errors, at least just even when you're initially drawing your layout, that can lead to issues. So we're going to get my zoom thing out of the way so I can see some stuff. All right, so we're back to the empty house. We're gonna go through we're gonna create a real quick layout. And so these are all our native models that Xlights gives us up here. And by native, I mean they're built into Xlights. And you want to try to use a native model whenever possible, because there's some built-in render effects and render styles that they take advantage of. So whenever possible, you want to use a native effect. There's nothing wrong with using custom ones. Just don't use a custom one when a native one will do the same job. So we'll start with a single line. All right, so we'll do this one. We're going to just draw it from here to here, and over here we can tell it how many nodes it has in this string. So we'll say this one has 25 nodes. And right now, actually, I meant to show you something. When you draw this line, if you hold the shift key, I'm going to get this now. If I hold the shift key, at some point, it's going to snap red. If you see that, when that snaps red, it's truly horizontal. So we want to make sure we draw a horizontal line. Okay, we'll draw another one up here. We're going to hold the shift key. You get the drop there. So we'll leave that one at 50 nodes. We're going to draw another one over here. Okay. Hold the shift key so we get a straight line. And we'll call this one 30 nodes. Okay. We're not going to worry about aligning them right now. Let's get everything drawn. Now, like this gable here, we can draw pretty easily with, this one's a polyline. So this will allow you to draw. We can click. I can left click again. I left click again here, and then I can just hit escape to terminate it. And in this case, we're still selected, and we'll make this a total of 40 nodes. So one thing when you're using the polyline, let's just we'll just show it up here. We'll do another one up here as an example. I intentionally drew it different, but you can come down here and there's this individual segments. And if you click this, you can tell it how many lights are actually in each segment. So Xlights is going to try to guess by how big you drew it that this is 15 and 35. Well, but maybe it was really 13 on that one and 37. All right. So that allow you to adjust it if you need to. Just wanted to show that why we're here. And then the other thing I wanted to emphasize, right? So this is called, got a name, single line. This is called single line 2. This is called single line 3 and polyline. So those aren't very good names. We should really name these what these are. So we'll call this roof porch. And maybe we'll call this roof left. And we'll call this roof right. And the reason you want to do this is when you're in your sequencer, this is going to make it way easier. And we'll call this our gable. And let's get that positioned a little bit better. All right, so now we're going to draw our verticals. We're going to start from the bottom. We'll draw this vertical up here. Same thing, we're going to hold the shift key. In this case, you could do it might be tough to see on your screen, but it does turn like a blue, and then we'll slide it in about there. And we'll give these verticals 30 nodes. I'm going to call this vertical 1. Now we know if we're going to we have a vertical here, we're going to put over here. Our house is the same height. We can just copy this. You can select it. You can hit Control C, then Control V, and that'll give us a duplicate. And by naming this one vertical 1 first, you can see it automatically Xlights automatically increases the count for us by 1. So we get a nice name. So when we do windows, the best tool to use is we got this window frame. And we're just going to click and drag and stretch it out. Right, and you can see here we can set the number of lights at the top, the number of lights on the left and right, and the number of lights on the bottom. And for ours, we're going to set the top to 12 lights. We'll do the left and right to 20. And that means 20 on each side, not 20 total. And 12 on the bottom. And then the next thing is, this is your starting location. So this is where your pixels or where your connection is going to happen. So in this case, we're saying we're coming in at the bottom left, but maybe, maybe ours, we're going to come at the bottom right. If you actually see this little light blue colored pixel, that's denoting your start channel. A tip would be if you're doing your window frames and they're all the same size, it's probably build them all the same. That way you don't have to keep track of where you're going to year to year, which one goes where. So we'll name that one window 1. We do the same thing. We're just going to copy it. Oh, I didn't hit Control C, Control C, Control V. Put it over there. And then next we'll click a little door. We're going to create a door. And to create a door, we're actually going to use the window frame model. And we'll do the same thing. We'll click and drag in here. And this is why they have the lights on the bottom, right? We can set the lights on the bottom for our door to 0. And we'll go with, say, 30 on the left and the right. And let's go with like 14 on the top. So now we got ourselves a pretty decent, basic layout. But let's add some actually on the house. But now let's align a few things. Actually, no, we're going to do something else before we come to the alignment. Let's create a couple of arches. So we'll use the arch model. So we'll click and drag and we'll create ourselves an arch. And this is the same thing. See, I'm holding the shift key and you can see when we get that red line, now we knew we draw that arch. The left and the right sides are perfectly level. So we'll call this arch 1. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to Control C, and we're just going to paste this in a few times. Let's see if we can fit 5 arches in here. And I'm not going to get too worried with how they're aligned right now. I'm not even going to try. All right. All right, so now I want to talk about how we can align different. Okay, let me take one step backwards. So I want to talk about starting locations first. All right. So we have a green square and a blue square. And we draw all our horizontal stuff with the green square on the left and the green square on the bottom. You can even see the arches, green square on the left. Okay. But where people get confused is maybe they're putting their controller right here. And they say, I'm going to run my wire up to here. And they think the green square needs to be there. And it doesn't, right? We talked about why we don't want to do that. What you really want to do is change your starting location. In this case, if you had your controller here, for this particular one, you would just change your starting location to the blue square. And that's where you're plugged into the controller. Same thing with your arches. Maybe we come out here and this is where we're going to connect in, right? We could change this arch starting location to blue square. All right. So that's where you want to deal with however you're wiring it, is by changing your starting location. Okay. Just think we always want green square on the left and consistent vertically, whichever way you choose. All right. Now we can get into alignment. So when we saw that we saw the problems we had with the original layout, right? We saw that our picture wasn't perfectly level. So we're going to pick this horizontal. And if I click this horizontal, we can, you see, we got them both selected. You're going to right click and we get several different alignment. We can align top, bottom, center, left, right, horizontal, and vertical center. Now, obviously for horizontals, it really doesn't matter. We'll just pick top. So what that actually did right there is it aligned this one, because it was the one I selected second, or I selected this one first. So it aligned this one with that one. I'll just move this like way up here so you can see that, right? If I pick this one first here, right click, align top. So now those are perfectly level with one another. If we want to try to get it close in the picture, we can select them both, and I'm going to use the arrow keys and move it down and sort of best fit our picture. Like I said, we're going to turn the picture down at the end. We can do the same thing with the windows, right? We want, all right, let's say we like where this window is. We'll select both windows and we'll align the top. Now both our windows are perfectly aligned. Let's move this down a little bit. Now we want the tops of our verticals to be aligned properly, right? We want them to be the same. When stuff moves up, align that to the top. And then we'll take our arches. We're going to go right click. We're going to align. In this case, we're going to align the bottom. We want to align the. Okay, but there's another alignment feature that we can use. It's very good with yard props or things that are evenly spaced. It's this distribute. So we can distribute horizontally or vertically. And what this does is it's going to space these evenly horizontally between our leftmost prop and our rightmost prop. So I'll just click this. And now we get these all picked, and we can move them around as a group, but they're all aligned perfectly level with one another, and they're all evenly spaced. So now let's talk about, all right, let's say we want to get a snowflake. All right, well, there's no native model for snowflake. For that one, we got to do, we can do a download. So we'll create a new download, and we'll just drag his face in here. And we'll just grab one of these 24-inch 3-prong snowflakes. And just, you know, there's all the different vendors are in here. Click insert model, and we get snowflake. And the same thing, we're going to call this snowflake 1. I noticed I screwed up earlier with my roof lines. I forgot to hit tab or enter, so it never took it and left them as single lines. Okay, so now we have snowflake 1. But the same thing, if we want a couple more snowflakes, we can control C, we can do control V. So we'll put a snowflake here, snowflake here. In this case, right, we'll click these 3. We'll go to align. We can align them, the bottoms of them, let's say, right? Now they're all our snowflakes are all looking good. So now we have a pretty decent basic layout to work with. But the next thing you'd want to do is create your groups. And a couple ways you can do them. You can pick the props over here. That's one way. I'm doing that with clicking the first one, shift clicking there, so that picks everything. I can come over here in window what I want. So now that we have everything collected, we're going to put these. We're going to create a group from selection, right? And we'll call this our all group or everything group, whatever you want to call it. Okay. Okay. Now what this red X is this is the center of that group, horizontally and vertically. So it's what it is. It's taking, since this is our leftmost or rightmost pixel over here and our leftmost pixel over here, and that's the center of it. And same thing vertically, it's doing the vertical center from here to here. And we can adjust that if we want to, but actually let's add a mega tree. So we're going to create a new tree model, and let's drop them over here, and it's a little too big. All right. So let's look at our settings here. So we're going to make ourselves a 180 tree. And let's make it 16 strands of 50 strands each. And this is something that gets people tripped up on. Right, you see number of strands, they have, oh, I got 16 of 50, I'm perfect. But that's not what it is. If you hover over this, it says the number of strands is actually the number of connections you have going to the controller. So let's say we're going to do, let's say we're going to use 4 ports on this tree. So this should really only be 4, because we're going to have 4 controller connections. But that doesn't look right, does it? Okay, and that's because a couple other things, right? So if we have a total of 4 connections, then how many nodes? We're going to go up, down, right? So that means we're going to have 200 nodes on a string. And then how many strands per string? Now that's how many up and downs we have. So we're really going up, down, which would be 4. Oh, I guess I gotta type it in like the red. So we ended up with the same thing, but now we've actually defined it correctly. If we left it the other way, when you dragged it onto use the visualizer, it would try and take up 16 ports. And so that's something that people struggle with. It's just remember your strings is the number of connections to your controller. And then this next number is how many lights are on each connection. So we have 200 lights because we go up and down 4 times, and 4 times 50 is 200. So now if we go back to our all group, we can look, well, our tree isn't in there. It's hanging out over here. So we can just select him and we can put him in there, and actually you can see what happened there. It actually shifted this over a little bit. And actually, I want to make one more little prop. We're going to put in a new. Yeah, let's just do a new. Actually, let's not use that one. Let's put ourselves a star. We'll put a star right here. We'll go back to our all group, and let's just add the star in there as well. All right. So now this is the center of our whole house effects group. So if we did like a spiral or anything, it's gonna look like it's emanating from this center point right here. And we can change that if we want. Just got to get a little bit of. Let me slide this up to give us some more space. See, there's using the center offset right here of X and Y. So let's say maybe we think, it would look really good if we use the center of this star as where we want X lights to think the center of our display is. And so if we try plugging in some numbers, let's say if we shift X 100, maybe a little more, let's say 150. That's a bit too much. Maybe Y we got to come up 200. No, probably like 600. There. So, but now, we've redefined our center point there. But we can create some other groups, right? We can go our arches, and we can do the same thing. We can do right click, create group from selections. We'll call them arches. And let's do a couple more groups. Let's make our verticals group. Click, right click over here. I lost my connections. So we'll call this our verticals group. I'm not sure what I did. Somehow I got my snowflake in there. Let's just do it. Let's double click on vertical 1, double click on vertical 2. Right? There's multiple ways, right? We can add an empty group, and we'll call it horizontal. What's our other one called? It was called roof gable. Oh, I left it polyline. See, this is why we should name them, so we can find them easier when we're trying to do our groups. Right. So now if we look at our verticals group, maybe you want to add this door in here, right? But there's no way to add these verticals in. We'd have to add the whole door, and we don't want that. So that's where we're going to talk about a little bit of submodeling. Okay, so if we pick our door, pulls up this window over here, we want to come down to where it says submodels. It says click to edit. So we click that, click the 3 dots. And we're going to add a submodel. And I got to get my Zoom thing that's in the way again. All right, so we're going to call this first submodel. We're going to call it, I'll use vert left. And then you can see the way our nodes go. It starts at 1, works its way up, across, and down. So we're going to select all of those. Okay, and then that's good. We'll go add. And we're going to go, we'll call this one vert right. And we're going to pick these ones. Now there's one change we got to make, because if you look here, right, this one starts at node 1 and goes up to what? Node 30, right? On our left side. So it's going from 1 to 30. On the right side, it's going from 45 to 74. All right. we need to change this. We really need to go from 74 to 45 because we want it moving in the same direction as this one, right? So we need to tell X lights it's actually flipped around, and we can do that by, in this case, we can just reverse that row and it goes 74 to 45. If we didn't do that and we put a vertical effect on it, we'd have one going up and one going down. They wouldn't be going the same direction. All right. And then let's just do the window really quick. We'll do a quick submodel of that. So we're going to add, we'll do a vertical left. Okay, so same thing. We're just going to select our left pixels. And it's really up to you for the corner pixels. You can either include them in the vertical or the horizontal submodel, but don't include them in both. So we're going to add another one. We'll call this one vert right. We're going to select them. Now you can see this one, it's starting at 46, goes to 64, and then we got a 1 down here. So we really want to go 1 to 64 to 46. So we're just going to, we really can't just use reverse row here because it's going to reverse everything. So we want to say we want to go from 1, comma, 64 to 46. Because now they're numbered the same way. It's good. And they'll behave the same. We'll add another one. We're going to call it horizontal bottom. And we're going to add another one. Horizontal top. So let's start with the top one, right? Because there's 34, there's 35. So we'll pick these. So again, we're going left to right with these. And we'll go down to our horizontal bottom. We'll pick these ones. Now see, look, it defaults from 2 to 13. It's going in increasing number, but this one we want to go 13 to 2, right? We want it to start at the left and work itself right as far as X lights is concerned. So in this case, we would have to reverse that row. So the order is going in the same direction as the rest of our display. Everything's working from left to right. So we should have 4 submodels. All right, so we went through all the trouble of making these submodels for this window, and maybe we got, in our house, we've got 5 windows on, or that are all identical, and we don't want to create those submodels a bunch of different times for every window. So there's a real simple fix. Okay, we're going to click on this window since this one's the same size. We're going to go to our submodels, but now we're going to use this import function. Okay, and we're going to import submodels from a model. And now it's going to ask us which model we want. And we want to use window 1. And then it's going to ask us, you know, if we only wanted to bring in some, we could. In this case, we want to bring them all. We're going to hit OK. And there we go. We've got our submodels all set for that one. So even a really better way to do it, if you're still doing your layout, would be to draw one window submodel and then copy and place it. And that would save you a little bit of a step from having to import the next ones. Let's go back to our groups now. So our all group still has everything in it. All right. So our horizontal, maybe want to add these windows horizontals to the top and the bottom. And sometimes an easy way to find those is using this filter here. We can type in, so if we type in horizontal, so now it actually found just those. And if you see them color coded in orange, that means they're just a submodel. That's just a way of letting you know. So we can click those. Now we've added those to our horizontal. And then we go to a verticals. And let's change our filter to vertical. So we got window. And then this would be our door, left and right. And now we've got all our verticals in there. Let's just shift our X on our verticals over. Let's just center it on the doorway just to make it look good. So we can do that there. So we're doing pretty decent on time here. Now let's say we wanted to make another group. And let's just say we wanted to call it our outlines. Let's make a new group. Add empty group. We'll call it our outlines. So now we hit outlines. Now some people would do this. They would take their horizontals, say, okay, we'll add our horizontals and I'll add my verticals, my groups. But you don't want to do that, okay? Because what you've done here, when you see these in blue, that means they're an actual group. And you've put groups in groups, and that's going to potentially cause you some render problems. It's not going to break your display. It's not the end of the world, but things may not render as you expect, or it's just things may look a little weird. So what you really want to do is make sure you are adding the individual items and not the groups. So in that case, well, maybe we'll just add, we got to add the roof gable for the last one. And so there, now we have just maybe our outlines. So that's the other common mistake we see a lot in the Zoom room there is people having groups and groups. So now we have a very, we created a very quick layout, but it's gonna work. It's gonna render as expected. And then probably should have talked about this background image. When you work on your layout, you can change the brightness and the transparency, and then you can actually knock it down. So maybe we make, say the transparency is only 25%, right? Is that gonna make it, hope that makes sense. Let's go the wrong way. Yeah, the brightness, I want to drop down now, drop the brightness down to 25%. So now when we're sequencing, or if I drop it all the way to 0, totally gets rid of it. But now you can actually see everything, all your lines line up and everything's going to look good. And when the whole house effects move up the screen or up your house, everything's going to match. So if you take anything out of this, use your picture as a guide and a template, but it's not you don't have to follow it perfectly. You want to make sure your horizontals and verticals are actually truly horizontally and verticals, and that things that are supposed to line up and be the same height are the same height. And then the last thing I want to talk about, and then we can take some questions, is the master view. So if we go over to the sequencer tab here, and we're just going to create a new sequence. And actually, because I'd already done something in here, it didn't do what I wanted it to. All right. Normally it would pull all your props in here, but I had a setting in here that we're going to talk about. And let me get my zoom bar out of the way. So we're going to pretend. All right. So let's just pretend this is how it came up. So what happens is it's going to bring, when you start a new sequence, it's going to bring the props in and it's going to create this master view for you. Okay. Now your master view controls the way your show is rendered. And what I mean by rendered, the way Xlights processes the effects. And it processes it on a layer level from the top down. So it means first it's going to render any effects on this, then it's going to work its way down, do this one, and this one. So if there's an effect on a lower level that overwrites the top level, that the lower one takes precedence, and it will show that. And you can use that to your benefit in sequencing. So normally what you want to do is you want to get this in some sort of logical order that makes sense from a rendering sequence. And the common one is, we'll show you, there's two ways to get to this screen. You can either right click and go to edit display elements, or you can click this icon up here, do the same thing, and it pulls up. Let me get this so it doesn't dock on us. It creates this. So this is all our props we have in here. A good default way to organize these is you can select them. You go right click, sort, and this will get you to at least a very good starting point. You want to sort by name, but groups it top by size. Right? This is typically will give you to a very good starting point for most people. All right, so what that did, it put all our groups at the top, and then the individual props are below, and they're in just alphabetical order. And the reason this works is, let's think, all right, if we're gonna put a whole house effect on our house, right, and just as a background effect, all right, that we're gonna have, and then maybe we want to do maybe some highlights on the horizontals and verticals. Well, we would want, let's actually just come back in here, right? So it's going to render this all group first, then anything the horizontals underneath it, anything the verticals, right? So it's going to show us, it's going to allow these to overwrite. It's the same thing, right? We got arches, so maybe we put some effect on our arches total, but then if you do something unique to your individual arches, you would want them lower in this order, so anything you did would show up on top of the effect there. The problem is every time you start a new sequence, Xlights is going to recreate your order, and it's not going to be the same. The easiest way to get around that is to create, which I had done in here and already, but we're going to pull up this thing again. Okay, we're going to call this, I call it ordered master view. You can name it whatever you want, but we just bring everything over into it. And we're going to sort that the same way as we just did our master view. And then there's one more setting you got to make, and that's under your file, preferences, and you go into sequences. And you see there's right here, this default view for new sequences. You set that at that ordered master view. And now what'll happen is every time you start a new sequence, it'll automatically set your master view to the same as your ordered master view. And you'll have nice, consistent layouts to work with. So what happened is I had already created that ordered master view when I was running through my practice, and then I deleted all these effects out of here. So my ordered master view was empty. So when it created a new sequence, it created an empty master view. But hopefully I didn't confuse you too much with that. And the very last thing, let's go back to the layout and let's add. Sure. We're going to add a wreath. Doesn't really matter where he is. We'll just put him there. Okay. Now, if I come back to my sequencer, I'm like, all right, I'm in my master view, but my wreath isn't here. Where is it? All right. It's because once your master view is created, any changes you make to your layout don't automatically show up in here. You gotta tell Xlights about it. So same thing. We want to go to edit our display elements. All right. We'll get into so there's our wreath. So we can just drag him over here, and that'll put him in our ordered master view. but he still didn't show up in our master view, right? Shows up in our ordered master view. The way we fix that, all right. Actually, I didn't save that correctly, did I? I probably moved into the wrong one. After you move the wreath over, you can just hit make master, and that will reset the master to match this. And so now we've got our wreath here. So I know I've covered a lot. And let's see if I go from current. So I think we've covered, we got through all of this stuff. And I guess, does anybody got any questions? Let's see what we
There's
got.
one in chat.
Yeah. In chat, as far as importing sequences, most of the vendors, including myself, are sequence mostly at the group level. And so that's why, you're generally going to want the groups at top. As far as an order, it doesn't, I guess you really need to think about what is going to potentially overwrite something else. Like, if we had other groups in here, like our snowflakes and stars, it doesn't really matter which order they're in, because the stars and the snowflakes aren't competing with each other. They are competing with the whole house effect. So you'd want them below that, but after that, it doesn't really matter. So you got another question. This about the windows and why not to include the corner prop or the corner in both submodels. It's mainly because if you end up sequencing on both submodels at the same time, it's only going to, whichever effect grabs it first is going to own that pixel. It's not going to cause any major issues. It's just for consistent results in your sequencing is why I would say you wouldn't want to do that. And the reason it's not as much of a problem in the singing faces is because it's treated a little bit differently. It's not, those are the only pixels that are on at that point. I hope, does that make sense? It's treated a little differently, but yeah, okay. And I guess, maybe one other thing is, let's go back to the layout really quick, because a lot of sequence vendors do this. Right, we've got our all group. We're going to duplicate this group. So we're going to clone the group. We're going to rename this, right click, rename group, all last. Where should I get my cap rights correct? Save. So now it's a duplicate, and we'll forget that we can delete him. I just wanted to show you when you add something, you have to add it. So let's go back to the sequencer. We're going to go back to edit display elements. So a lot of sequencers will use an all last, and it's the one group that goes at the bottom of your master view. And the reason is, did I not save that?
You might be missing the buttons on the bottom of your screen or something.
I wonder if I am. All right, it's there now. So you want this, all last at the very bottom, because you can do fade ins and fade outs that affect the entire layout. Because you think this is the very, so I've got this owns every pixel in the layout. So if I want to have something fade out across the entire layout on everything at once, you could do it simply with one effect here instead of having to do it across, 20 other effects up through the middle. And Tom asked, how soon will this be available on YouTube? That's a good question, Tom. I know they intend to publish them. I don't know how soon. After this, it's, I would assume in a couple of weeks. They have a lot of videos to go through. They get processed up and done, but I don't know that exact answer. Daryl, I don't know if you get any more info on that.
No, nothing specific. It's they're doing their best efforts. Next, 1 to 2 weeks probably. Actually, if you've got 2 minutes, Mark, why don't you throw a couple of on effects on the all, and then just to show
Yeah, all right, we'll
the
do
overlapping process.
Sure. So we'll put let's get the white off there, because then we can use. All right, so we got this bars effect that's going up our house here. Let's just make it a little bit. Let's make it go a little bit faster. And then I should have made myself a snowflakes group. But if we come down here and we'll drop an on effect on a snowflake, make him white. You can see here, the snowflake is overwriting the on effect, which is really what you want to do, right? If we want to have, same thing. If we move it to a different snowflake, it's gonna, right? It's on that single line. We move it to a different snowflake, and then maybe you could do something with the horizontals where you get all sorts of. So we created one effect here, but so these, if the lower the effect is in here, the higher priority it takes in your display, because it gets drawn after the first effect. So think of it, these are like sheets of paper. You draw this one, you cover it up, draw this one, this one. Hopefully that makes sense. But if I click on the snowflake, or if we go ahead and we'll do a little animation on one of these other snowflake. Get a little more thickness to it. So as you can see, we've got let me get the green off of it. So we got a white just pinwheel effect on it. So where the pinwheel effect, and we haven't filled the whole thing, so the bars effect that's on the whole house effect is still showing through the back of it, except where the pinwheel is actively displaying its pixels. But that's all I have. If there's no other questions, you can stop.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, for the presentation. Also, don't forget, folks, that you want to go visit the discount code page. I just threw it in chat.